You're listening to the MBA Success Podcast, featuring a wide range of conversations with the best and brightest MBA alumni. I'm Ross Barclay, and together with our guests, we explore their past, understand how their MBA has helped them achieve their career goals, and gain insight into what success means for them. This podcast is a part of MBA Australasia, the professional body that promotes the standing and enhances the value of MBA qualifications throughout Australasia. On today's episode, I talk to Raja Sahulhammed, currently a Principal Advisory and Global Lead Capital Excellence at Hatch. Raja started his career as an engineer before studying his MBA at University of Cambridge in the UK. Raja then moved into consulting, spent 10 years at McKinsey, working around the world, including Dubai, Houston, Texas, and Perth, Australia. Good afternoon and welcome, Raja Sahulhammed. It's wonderful to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Ross. I'm glad to be part of the podcast.
Excellent. We've had a bit of an introduction to your sort of history, your work history, just at a very high level in the introduction to this episode. But I really would love you to walk us through a bit of that. You've worked across multiple continents. You've gone from being an engineer to consulting work. So, yeah, I'd love to add a bit more color to hear about how your journey's progressed.
Yeah, as you mentioned in the introduction, I'm a metallurgical and material science engineer by background, and I started my career in a flagship project in the Middle East, where we worked on building a new steel plant. Right, but in that experience, I realized a need for knowledge beyond engineering to be able to successfully build and operate a manufacturing facility. Right, so I decided to do an MBA. Went to the UK, studied MBA at Cambridge, and then became a management consultant and been a management consultant for over 10 years now. While as a consultant, obviously moved around different locations. Started off in London, then I was in Dubai, then Dubai moved to Houston, and then came to Perth in 2017. I would say I had a lot of variety in my work that I could have asked for. So it was a good experience. And now currently I'm a principal within the advisory business in Hatch, and I lead the Western Australian business here.
Excellent. And we'll come to your MBA studies. You studied at the University of Cambridge. You obviously moved at some point from Dubai over to the UK and decided what was, I guess, when did you first become aware of an MBA degree? And we'll start with that.
Yeah, I think I've heard of MBA before. My dad did MBA as far as like a executive MBA back in, I think, 1980s. It seems so. I know of it, the degree exists, but I never knew what it meant for. Right. I think where the time when I really realized the need for an MBA is when I was working on a capital project on a building, spending $1 billion. It was great to be a project manager at a capital project, but you are expected to be aware of the financial and commercial element of the business, right? Which I didn't learn through my engineering education. And I realized that this is much more than what I thought and probably require a proper formal education. But at the same time, I don't want to become a chartered accountant because that's something else, right? So I decided to do an MBA.
Yep. And you did still become a chartered accountant though, right?
Yeah, I did. I mean, that was like a part-time thing. I started I wanted to learn a bit. So I started as doing a diploma. So the chartered management accounting, you do a few courses and be a diploma in management accounting, which I said, okay, let me learn some basics while I prepare for my GMAT, which took for me, I think it took me 2 years to get the right score as the GMAT score to be able to go into Cambridge. Right. So while I'm doing that, I learned the basics, which is actually very helpful for me because I was able to ease the financial and accounting papers during my MBA.
Yeah, interesting. So, not every engineer finds the need to go and get that financial experience. What specifically was it? The nature of the projects you were working on, or was it the role that you were taking on in those projects that made you want to sort of continue to look down that path and learn more about that financial side?
I think probably giving a bit of flavor of what those projects, which we do quite a bit in Australia, is actually relevant, right? If you think about building any new major resources or infrastructure projects, be it building a new metro rail or building a new mine, what happens is usually they are significantly funded by the lending institutions, be it banks or other investors, and they lend it based on the assumption that says this project you are going to construct it in a certain period of time. I'm going to spend a certain amount of capital, and I'm going to get a return back over a period of 10 to 15 years, whatever that may be, right? And that means you are eventually, as a project manager, you need to be aware of the implications of the decisions you make during the construction phase and the development phase of the project into what will happen during operations, right? Am I going to change a little bit on the design that will change the operating part of it, which will eventually either uplift or erode my margin when the project is actually, or the facility is in operation? So it required a lot more understanding of the simple but important financial factors such as your IRR and NPV. So I think if most engineers after a certain point in time, you eventually have a profit and loss P&L responsibility, which means you need to learn either informally or formally the business element, and if their business exists to make money, at least most of them, right? Yeah. And it becomes a important element for, even doesn't matter where you're coming from, be it technical or science, or be human science and all of that. You need to still have the business lens, and it's becomes a part of. And MBA is probably maybe the fastest way to learn the important elements for being able to understand and make business decisions.
Yeah. And can you fill me in on what did the MBA look like at Cambridge? Was it full time, couple of years, or what did that look like for you?
It's a 1 year full time. I went to MBA when I had over about 5 years experience. So when you are at 5 years experience, you typically do not want to go away from working for 2 years, right? So usually try to do it in a short sprint. So I did it in a 1 year MBA, which was actually, I think it gave everything that you need to learn from an MBA, but also puts you among the people who are at similar level. I think maybe a little of a sidetrack, but if you think about people doing an MBA, they usually do it for a jump in their growth within their current career, or they try to make a switch, right? But the switch is not like you don't, what we call as a triple switch, right? You don't just switch your geography, sector, and function. Yeah. Usually, especially if you're coming within 5 years experience, you are typically making one or maximum two shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's sort of why, or what was attracting to Cambridge, and that's why he did a 1 MBA.
Yeah. And tell us a bit about your experience while you were studying. Well, what was different to studying the MBA in comparison to some previous studies you'd done?
I think MBA is a different type of masters. I think most master education, you are specialized in one topic, either on the topic that you have already did your undergrad, or maybe something else, but you are necessarily going deeper. MBA is the one probably masters where you actually don't go deep at all. You cover more, and you technically become like a jack of all, king of none, right? When compared to all other masters, right? So I think my objective for an MBA is to get a understanding of broader business, which I think that delivered. The second element, which probably I didn't realize, or probably I didn't appreciate enough before I went for an MBA, and I found it how important it was, is the network that you build, the networking you do during an MBA, right? I have people now working from all over the world, working in different type of industry and sectors. I know them. I learned a lot from them by doing this MBA.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating. And in terms of, I guess, how the class work and the assessment stuff, was it a bit of a shock from the departure of how engineering's done, or was that similar? Was that something you had to adjust to, or was that just something that felt quite natural to you?
I wouldn't say it's called, it felt natural because you have been in industry. Have been working with people for many years now.
Mm-hmm.
And MBA, as I think most MBAs is that you spend most of your work as a team. You form your own work team, study group and team group. You deliver almost all the assignments in groups except for one or two. Yeah. So I think the working style is different, and they are more in line with how you get work done in an industry, right?
Yep.
I think that's what sort of I would say, and that's very much aligned with where you want to build the skill on, right? It's not, you are never, especially when you are like coming as 5 years experienced person, you are never going to do work anything alone, right? You always work with a team, either with your
Yep.
peers, with your subordinates or superiors, doesn't matter, but you always have a team.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned there a couple of things around working in the teams, the group assignments, the nature of, I guess, the work and the assessment involved. Moving into consulting, into that profession, how did that set you up, to succeed in that particular area?
So if you think about, most MBA courses are actually designed in a way where you get case studies. You sort of try to understand what's happening in the context, in the project context, which you use like assignment context, and you try to come up with an answer, right? And that is technically what we do as a management consultant, right? Consultant, we walk in, I always say my client knows always more than what I know about their business. I will never be able to catch up to what they know, not even to a double digit percentage of what they know about the business. But what I bring to the table as a MBA, which you learn in MBA, but also you continue to do it as a consultant, is able to quickly understand what the problem is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and structure the problem, break it down and structure it, and then able to think about what is the best way to answer it, right? Which is, may sound simple, but you'll be surprised how less often it is applied in business. Breaking down the problem and decision making is, and MBA trains you for that, which is more case study oriented and less on understanding the theory.
I mean, it's obviously a well-known quote that Einstein one. If you spend however many days thinking about a problem, you think about defining the problem properly, and then you spend the last little bit to solve it. Why do you think it is that there's not too many of the degrees, especially in the early parts of somebody going through a university, like a bachelor's or something, that they're not teaching more problem solving skills when it's clearly such a crucial part of business, and working towards the right outcome?
Yeah, that's a good point, Rose. I think it is more around acquiring knowledge and learn about, and we spend less time about applying the knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And but the education system is also changing, right? Especially having studied MBA in a university which is as ancient as I can think of, with 800 years history. Even they are evolving. The assessment methods have evolved just in a period of 10 years. How much I'm part of the alumni group, so I know how the assessment are changing at Cambridge. So it's changing. They are making even more practical, even more knowledge application, because knowledge is now less difficult to find with Google in your hand, or you can I can almost
Mm.
know anything. You can learn anything in a short span of time.
Yeah.
The education system need to change, and MBS is probably the most forefront in that, in practicing students in applying the knowledge, even though that may be much little when compared to the individual deep experts of those topics.
Mm. Given that you've obviously occupied some roles where you've had to lead teams and get performance out of them, is there has that helped shape some of the way that you approach dealing with your teams and helping them improve as individuals? Working in a business, is there any element to that?
Yeah, I think, before I was a consultant, and when I was an engineer, it's more around hierarchy, right? Your role is very much defined, and you are expected to deliver a certain outcome, be it to the business, to your boss, to your team, or whatever. But once you're an MBA, when you are put in a team, there's no boss. You have to
Yeah.
influence your team members to do certain things, and you have to do your part equally and build that trust. And that's number one. Number two is when I was an engineer, I was more siloed around working with engineers. And the MBS B schools are extremely good in creating a mixed group. I had a one of the team, my team member was a movie distributor previously when before he came to an MBA, and I had no idea about that, and I have to listen carefully from my fellow team members to get their understand their perspective, right? Number two, right? And which is very similar to what the clients will behave when you are a management consultant. You
Yeah.
know, there's a reason why MBAs are the most successful management consultants is because you, as I said, you learn some of the skills, right? So number two is around being able to listen and understand perspective who are not from your discipline, doesn't have your similar approach to solving problems, right?
Mhm.
But and number three, I think, which I probably mentioned before, is able to quickly grasp the problem, because team, you get a papers that gives you a description of what the problem is in a company, and you have to make some assumptions and do that, right? I think that's number three. So all these three things is what I would say that I learned more from the MBA working experience that is directly relatable to what I do as a management consultant.
Yeah. And was there anything particularly surprising for you along your experience? I know that a lot of people I've talked to have had really, interesting experiences within like the internal reflection part of leadership. Looking inwards to understanding. Was there? And I'm not trying to lead the question in any way, but did you have any other things where I was like, wow, I didn't think I'd be learning this, or that was a really powerful lesson?
I think there are two subjects we had. One is around what they call as like influence based decision making. Yeah.
Hmm.
Is like how do you influence people to make a decision which you believe is right one, not necessarily the right one, but you believe the right one, where you are necessarily forced to understand the personality of other people, right? And some of most MBAs would understand MBTI is a one way of sort of grouping and classifying people's work, approach to answering a question or addressing a problem or engaging and interacting, like MBTI. That was new to me. That's something that I never expected that I'm going to learn from MBA. I learned more about myself um, during MBA than what I learned about others.
Yeah.
Right? You are made to reflect a lot on that. You have your good days and you also have a few bad days as well as an MBA. Right? Especially if you're working on tough team assignments and stuff. Yes, you'll have. And that's part of the learning experience.
Yeah. Um, I guess staying on that concept of the influencing stakeholders and I guess managing the people, um, is have you got, and this is I guess not so particularly centered around the MBA, but just something that might be interested for listeners to understand how you approach these sorts of things. But have you do you have a particular approach with how you look to you know step through times where you do need to influence people? Yeah, I guess is there a framework that you found, or have you created something for yourself that really helps?
Yeah, I think generally there's a one framework which is from McKinsey, which is also probably if you Google it, you'll find one probably the most used framework in McKinsey. It's called the influence model,
Okay.
is right, and it talks about the four elements that you need to address to make people think and act differently, right? I mean, it won't be surprising, but you'll. It's often that one or more of the four is not done very well,
Yep.
and that's why you don't get the change happen, right? It starts with the four buckets is like obviously the role modeling is first part, especially you role model by saying that you do it and you get the rest of the crew to do it, and the number two is around giving them the reason why they have to do it, right? That's a very, very important part. They need to understand what is in it for them. Even if there's nothing in it for them, at least they need to understand what is in for the company or the organization that I work for, right? So they need a good reason why they need to do it.
Yep.
And number three is knowing people, telling people how to actually do it, right? Sometimes you say, oh, you need to do it differently, but like you have to, unless you tell them what do you mean by different, how they need to do it. Sometimes that means giving trainings and stuff is actually important. That's number three. And number four is making things stick by hardwiring, they call it, right? Make it part of the KPI, right? If it's not in somebody's KPI, then how do even how much ever they motivated they may be, it may not be in the top of the list if it is not in the KPI of the individual. It could be personal KPI, personally if they want it could be in their growth aspiration, or it could be a professional KPI for quarterly, halfly, whatever that is. But all elements have to be addressed to actually influence people. And I use this very often, and I'm sure some of my ex-colleagues have used it as well, and they still use it as well. Probably one of the most used.
Are there any? Can you think of any examples where you didn't follow it to a T and you didn't get the outcome that you wanted, and you could sort of tie it back to how that didn't work?
Yeah, I think you know mm, in one of the client situations where we were sort of trying to change some of their operating model, right? How the procedures and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
We had a good written document that tells how to do it. We in fact did a good training as well. We had their boss, he or she, they are also sort of role modeling that the new methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And then we basically, even initially we did not tell them why, but I think that we realized quickly and then we were able to say why.
Yep.
But what we really missed is hardwiring. So within like 4 weeks, when the person went for vacation and they came back, they went back exactly to the same way as how it was before.
Yeah.
Before we did the change, because the nothing from a system and the procedure and the requirement perspective has changed. So they go back to their old habits. So I think we realized that we haven't done enough in hardwiring, which is changing the internal company procedures and KPIs and all of that to match the new operating procedures. So we did that, and we were able to at least recover most of what the um, performance drop was.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, is there a time that you can think of where you kind of thought, I don't think we've got too much of a chance to actually influence the way we want to, and it actually like sort of surpassed that, and they actually bought into it more than you're expecting?
In all change management programs, you have people who that you are never going to crack, right? And at least you consider them as too much of effort to change, put in to change them, and you deprioritize it, right? And you never know whether how this is going to play out, but you have only limited hours and effort that you can apply. And I had actually one particular client person who said, probably this person is everybody told me that that person is going to be very difficult and it's not going to help that much. And I didn't have high expectations. I went around, do the standard stuff, right? Tell them why this new thing is the right thing to do, why it's better than what they have, and etc. 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 Right? And then they say, oh, fine, but I don't think it's right one, and the usual pushback. And they actually even challenged us to why this is the right thing to do, challenged me personally, and then the broader approach. Right? I didn't sort of give it, but after like 2 weeks, I realized actually one of the colleagues told me that they actually trying to specialize in another topic that which we are not focusing on, and that one information helped us. All it took me was then I get the person who's really really deep in the topic that they're passionate about, get that expert to come in and have a 2 hour meeting with them, and then all of a sudden the next day, Monday morning, everything changed, right? It's what we call as what is under the iceberg, right? Most of icebergs under the water, you don't see it, and you need to really understand the personal motivation to address it
Yeah.
for people to really see the benefit.
Yeah. Is that way of thinking, that really trying to get under the hood, so to speak, and understanding that personal motivation probably on an individual level, is that still something that's not seen often enough, or is it seen quite often in the consultancy world, but when you go into other businesses, you just don't see that particularly often?
Is still not often in consulting or in industry, because people don't have time, right? Yeah, we have so much of distractions. both even a professional world with I have Teams messages, emails, SMSs, and my clients messaging in WhatsApp to catch up. I don't have time to actually sit down and have the conversation to really understand people's motivation, right? And I mean, I'm sure if you'll find a lot of good practices, being like just setting up time, having coffee chats with them, and it's not easy, but it's an important skill to be able to active listening, to read between the lines what they are actually thinking about to do it. I think that's absolutely necessary. And you see all successful senior executives know how to do this. I
Yeah.
don't know of any good senior executive who have reached the level where they are good in technical stuff but not so good in people stuff. Yeah, as I say, we are always in people business. Doesn't matter what you produce, what you manufacture.
Yeah. 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 That's the definitely a very constant part of business. Um, I want to delve in a little bit. You've obviously had a lot of success, in your career with, moving up through businesses and those sorts of things. Are you one of those people that, has set a goal early on in your career and say, I want to, end up being a partner in a big consultancy firm, or did you just sort of go along for the ride?
But it's more this second one, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have any intent of becoming a partner and stuff. I thought, I definitely wanted to go into consulting because it promised variety, right?
Mhm.
And it did deliver on that promise, right? It was a very steep learning curve, absolutely. Be it both from business perspective, but also everything that I told you about. I probably learned all of that in the first few years as a management consultant, right? Because you are as a consultant, you don't have any authority, nor sort of responsibility to deliver stuff, but you still need to make a client think and act differently. That
Mhm.
requires a lot of people skills, and I learned it
Yep.
as a management consultant,
Yeah.
starting from my
And
MBA, of course, and then continuing into the consulting.
yep, yep. So when you, in that sense, have you, being at, in one job, do you generally sort of look a few years into the future and go, what's the next step I want to take? And then do you have a bit of a plan as to how to approach that? And then, do you not manipulate anything but understand what are the factors that you need to push? Like, how to impress your manager, what you need to do from a performance level. Are there steps that you take to look at the next move?
Yeah, I think I usually sort of consciously do three things, right? Everybody do some things subconsciously. They do it, they are good at it and stuff. But consciously, you'll have to make effort in few things, right? I consciously make effort in three things, right? Number one, you know, making sure understanding, what will make my team successful, right? I have to grow, my
Mm-hmm.
team has to grow. There is no way that the team doesn't grow and I can grow. Absolutely no. As I said, we are a people business, even more so in professional services. Right? Number one. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Number two is really being, you know, conscious of what is needed in the market, right? Yeah, be open, right? Be opportunistic, right? You may have a plan, yes, right? I had a plan, yeah. But if you ask me why I focus something now, I'm focusing because I'm being opportunistic, right? Yeah, so I will be passionate in one, which is important, but you also need to be opportunities, right? You don't want to be the person um, who's probably better suited to in PhD and not so much in a business, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I have great respect for people who do PhDs, absolutely. So the case, but what I'm saying is, if you are in business, if you're trying to grow a business and grow a team, you have to be opportunities in the market, right? And all of us are, right? And all of the businesses are, right? So I think that's sort of number two, right? Number three, you have to build a trust to be able to do things that's right by people and by company, right?
Mm-hmm.
All it takes is like, it doesn't mean that you have to like always over deliver. It's just by setting the right expectations and delivering on your expectations, right? You'll say, you'll know the person within your team or outside the company, you ask anybody, they'll say, who do you trust for a complex job? Everybody will point to a couple of people, and you know them. They are the people that all the way from CEO, doesn't matter. They'll be across all the levels, right? Be it a manager, be it your director, be it your analyst. There's one analyst you will trust and you give them and they will get it done. Not because they are the smartest, because they are the people who will find ways to get things done. And if they cannot find the ways, they will ask you and tell you upfront that they can't find the way to get things done, and they'll ask for your help, right? So I think I'm the guy, probably I won't hesitate a second to ask for help if I think I don't know the right answer, right? And that's a way to build trust. Asking for help doesn't destroy trust; it actually improves trust.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the first and third one sound very selfless in the approach to working in a collaborative environment, and I'm sure all the literature and everything goes to back that up. It makes me think of a lot of Simon Sinek stuff, right? And the way that he talks about leading people. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you are a really good leader. And then with the staying relevant in the market and being able to offer what's needed, is there, I guess, what do you do in that space? How do you approach that? Is it just the research and understanding, or just keeping your ears to the ground in the market?
No, I'll give a very practical example, which is probably relevant, right? I think 10 years ago, or probably now 11 years ago, when I started management consulting, the biggest value add I bring to the client is my ability to analyze the data that the client had and
Mm-hmm.
structure it in a way that is most useful for them. Today, my client can do exactly what I took a week to do within a couple of seconds with softwares and tools, even like simple Power BI, right? You have your complex Excel file, put a Power BI, link it to Power BI, you can produce charts like within seconds. That took me hours in 2011 when I started as a management consultant, right? 12 years ago, right?
Yep.
So what do I add if I trying to do this? If I go to the client today, say, you know what, actually I can analyze the data and tell you what is the right thing is. I'm not adding that much value, right? So I need to find a way of what new things I bring to the table, right? It could be around, not just structuring the data, but it's more around what additional data that you may need to help you in decision making, or it be around with the data that you have, what type of action you may have to take to change and improve stuff, right? So every single management consulting firm is evolving, and they have to evolve if they want to survive, right? I used to work for as one of the top prestigious management consultants, and even that company, what they did in 2011 is not the same they are doing now.
Yeah. And staying in that work sphere and keeping it people centric, do you have a typical way in how you handle some of the most important work relationships? Again, whether that's with team members or your manager, or even some of the execs that sit up above there.
Yeah. Probably I'm going to repeat one thing, that the trust part is definitely, yeah, when you take up a job, you do it, right? I think that's how you build the trust. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the trust equation. There's a trust equation where you say,
It's been a while.
yeah, trust equation, comes from, there's only one element of it which is based on your knowledge and expertise, right? There are three more elements, right? Which is about your reliability, you are able to sort of deliver on sort of what you do, right? And and you're also about being authentic, yeah, and giving the saying the fact and stuff, and we're also being sort of, not being sort of so much selfish, right? So there are a lot of other elements that make up the trust, and in fact the most difficult of that is your the most difficult is not the expertise part, because expertise you can pull it. The rest of the stuff is what makes it difficult to be able to trust, right? And I think that's what is, in my view, sort of most important that I do. That's sort of, probably still generic level, right? Tactically, I do three things, right? Number one, you have to make a conscious effort to keep connected with the people, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And people are busy, people get so much of requests to connect with people. I always go for a coffee chat with my current clients, ex clients, potentially future clients. I'll go, but if you catch me for coffee, obviously we have split up time to, you know get to know each other, but I always make every single meeting useful.
Mm-hmm.
It could be them learning about something that they did not know, right? Or it could be around sharing some best practices from somewhere else, right? Yeah, what's happening in the rest of the world. Yeah, it could be any topic, right? But always making every single meeting useful is probably key to networking, and that I learned during MBA. Again, that's one of
Yeah.
the things that I didn't know so much about how important it is before I went to MBA, and the importance of networking. Yes, as an engineer, you just get your job done, do the numbers, follow the process, and you're fine. No, MBA told me no, that's much more beyond. So I think that networking, how to keep up a network, is conscious effort to stay connected and being relevant and useful in every single effort.
And do you think that or do you find yourself sitting more on that extroverted side of things, and you find that easier to do, or is that something that you have a less extroverted side of you, and you've consciously have to go like, no, Raja, put the time in and keep those relationships warm.
So I'm in the second category. So I think I have to put the effort. If I don't do it, my natural self will say, "Oh, don't worry, bother. You're doing a good job. Keep doing the work. Don't worry about that." Right? As I said, it's that's something that I have to put extra effort. Right? That's something I don't get it naturally, so I have to put the effort.
So you can sort of see, and this is an interesting question, I guess, is kind of in and around that same thing. When you're in a big company like you're in now, or McKinsey, can you see from the younger groups of people that are working there and coming through? Can you identify the ones that you think will be more successful based on some of these traits, where they're a bit more likely to foster their relationships, they're a bit more likely to think pragmatically about how they're going to add value into the future and those sorts of things?
Yes, you can easily sense it. So, I mean, you will, having the years of experience will tell you who you think will be quite successful in that one. But with a big caveat there, right?
Yeah.
Ambitious people who join these organizations, right? They can change, as I did change, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what my the partner in back in 2011 would have said. I don't know whether he saw the skills that I had is sufficient to be a partner or not, but I'm sure that he will say that now it was better than what it was at that time, right? So people, especially very ambitious people who invest a lot of money to do an MBA and eventually go into consulting and professional services, they actually put the effort and they change. They change, right? But that's where the feedback comes into picture, right? You continuously give feedback on skills that you see that really good, the things that you think is good, but you could do better. Yeah. And, you always get three tips of advice I give to my people. Sorry for being three every time, but that's what I'm used to,
I love
right?
it.
So you could have advice
Yeah, it's good.
one advice you get, that, yeah, I know I'm not good at it, and you're just telling me what I already know. I don't care.
Yep.
Fine, that's fine, right? That's not a natural strength, and you have no intent of being better at it, right? That's right.
Yep.
The second set of advice or feedback you get is the one that you think it's important. They also see that you are at some gaps and you can improve, and you basically learn from what they're telling you and say, okay, yeah, this just reinforces what I've been working on so far. Probably need to do more on that. And when you get a positive feedback on that, you're actually saying that, okay, I've been working on it and I see some improvement, right? So that's number two, right? The third set of advice, a feedback that you get is the one where you didn't know, they observed it, and they're telling you, oh, then you realize, oh, did I do that, or did I say that? Oh, is that how I looked at it? Oh, probably I didn't realize it. So that's subconscious, and I've got feedback of all three types throughout my career. Yeah. From I have been lucky to work in organizations where feedback is an important part of the culture. So I had positive and negative across all three dimensions that you see, right?
Yeah.
And you obviously have to you don't have to do anything about the first one. You're fine. Only the second and third you continue to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely no doubt that you need to be able to operate in an environment where you can pick up the signals of how you're acting, how the other individuals in that space are responding to you, and understand am I going the right way, am I going the wrong way? And yeah, if there is a divergence there between what the others think about your actions and how you think that you're operating, then yeah, you're in for a bit of shock. And I think, to your point, the best leaders are the ones that can give that feedback in a constructive manner to help them realize that, hey, you actually, you acted like this. People thought of this about you. You might not have been aware that that's actually how you came across. So yeah, it's really important. Yeah. Um, One of the last things that I thought would be interesting to explore, given that you've had the opportunity to work quite broadly in your career. For people that are interested in trying to, move around or get jobs in different countries, is there is there something that you were looking for personally, or those opportunities just came up and you thought, why not? And you sort of jumped at them.
I think both, I'd say. When I was in the Middle East, which as a market is a different level of maturity when compared to Houston, right? So when I did my MBA, worked briefly in London, came to Middle East, they are very ambitious projects, but the maturity of the market, given that how many decades or generations it has been operating,
Yeah.
the problems they face are a little bit different from the problems that is faced by companies in the US. So I thought, okay, probably it's a good time for me to. I've learned quite a bit in the Middle East, working in some of the challenges they have, but I also want to learn the other side. So I've been to the US, and what I learned in the US, especially the client problems are different, the scale is different, and what they want to get out of it is different, and even like sometimes the capability of people that they have we can engage and employ is also different, right? So I think that's been an excellent one. That's for example the move from my Dubai to US, right? But while I was in the US, the opportunity in Australia came about and say there is an important thing, that program that you want to run for 6 months, we think that require role is requirements or best matches what do you experience you have, can you come in and run it for us? So actually I came here as like a 6 months, what, yeah, there's like a short term transfer, what do we call it, you come in and you do that effort. I did
Yep.
that for about 4 or 5 months, and then just we liked it, my wife liked it, so I decided to make it our home here, Perth.
Nice. Excellent. So, is there something that you would advise people to do or think about, or steps to take if they are looking to try and do something similar?
I think absolutely, and I think gaining international multicultural experience is extremely helpful, right? It uh, it actually challenges you in some of the assumptions and approaches you have. It challenges you in the perceived answers or the toolbox, the tool set that you will have. No, that doesn't work in this context, sorry, it won't work, you have to think about it differently, right? Be it in the organizational or just culture of the country, right? Organizational culture or the culture of the country. I mean, how do you give instructions to the team in an organization, for example, in Indonesia, is very different from how you do it in the US,
Yep.
right? Um, Even just getting people to talk, I need to plan the type of people I need to have in their room. If I'm going to have the boss, the big boss in the room, the rest of the team will not talk, right? So those are things that's very different from how we operate in the Australia or in the US, right? So there are a lot of things that is, the variety, has, I think some researchers have been proven that the variety you get from these experiences is actually makes you a better leader and diversify your thinking and solutions.
Interesting. And last question I have is, where do you see some of the biggest hurdles coming from? I guess in your space, from big challenges is obviously, whether it's workforce, this introduction of AI. I'm sure that the work you guys do is highly specialized and probably quite a long way away from a threat of AI. But are there sort of big threats on the horizon that you guys or you are paying attention to? And I guess, how are you thinking about those and applying some early strategies to mitigate those?
I think I would group some of the challenges that I talk to quite often with my team and broader the company that I work at, and with my clients, is can be grouped with them as, one is people, other one is climate and environment, number three is in technologies, and you can put them in like, like the AI probably I'll put in the third bucket, and you talk about the decarbonization of that in second bucket. But the first bucket is, even though we don't get so much of media attention, it is an important topic of discussion among corporates and organizations. both in Australia and elsewhere, right? We have I don't know, a crisis of getting peoples to be good in interacting with people effectively, not just interaction, effective interactions, right? We are used to so much of disruptions and information overload. People's ability to filter the noise and get to the topic is very important. Number one, just complementing that is also all those external diversions that is creating stress and has impact on the well-being mental health and well-being of individuals, peoples, my 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 colleagues, my clients, and the people clients organization is also is a big challenge that should not be taken for lightly. Yeah, I mean, you, as I said, the attention span of individuals are no longer 1 hour lectures is 3 minutes TikTok videos, right? Which means I need to communicate to the millennials in my organizations in 3 minutes, otherwise I lose them,
Yep.
right? Yeah, you can say it, you may like it or not, but that's a fact. I used to sit as in lectures until like not long ago, until 10 years ago at Cambridge, and listen to 1 hour lecture and take 10-page notes.
Yep.
I don't know if they do that still, unless you're, especially for the new generation of people who are coming in. Probably the people who are going to MBA now, probably they may be, but I'm talking about in another 10 years' time. I don't think the 1 hour lectures concept is going to work. I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, I'm sure people are solving this problem, but that's from my academic perspective. From as an employee perspective, you need to constantly think about. And again, I encourage my team to not send an email, uh, type in the Microsoft Teams, and send me a text message and have a phone meeting call scheduled. No, let's try to streamline it. And not many people are good at it. We do so much of multitasking, which is making us less effective communicators and listeners.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, that's a little fascinating insight and a good way to end the podcast, I think. But Raja, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure to speak to you, and absolutely fascinating. I absolutely love that. Yeah, everything was in threes. It's definitely easy to take that out and have a look at some of those things, because honestly, that is really insightful, and I think you've got a really interesting way of approaching some of those problems, and I think people will get a lot out of this episode. So yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, Ross. It was a pleasure being part of this, and happy to contribute to MBAs in whatever manner, and keen to stay in touch, and happy to help out if people want to reach out.